The skies above Valar Prime were not like the skies of other worlds. Once they had been painted with shades of silver and violet, glowing softly as twin moons rose together at night. The Valari people had written songs about those skies, had painted them across stone walls and crystal plates, and had believed their beauty would last forever. But now the skies carried only shadows. Great steel warships of the Xeroth Dominion hung like daggers above the world, cutting the light into fragments for the Valari. Hope had long ago become a forgotten word. Arin Velthar sat near the crumbling balcony of the old library, looking out toward the horizon. His eyes, pale like the soft glow of moonstone, did not shine with the curiosity of a young historian anymore. Instead, they reflected exhaustion. He was still young in years, but war-aged people in different ways. The Dominion had ruled Valar Prime for more than 70 years, and Arin had never seen his world free. Below the balcony, empty streets stretched across the city. Markets that once held laughter and trade now stood silent. Shops were boarded, doors chained, and walls bore the black sigil of the Dominion, painted like a brand upon the skin of the city. Patrols of armored soldiers marched down those streets, their metallic steps echoing through the silence, making sure no one dared to resist. The Valari were once a proud species, known across the galaxy as scholars, healers, and artists. Their ships were made for exploration, their words for peace and their voices for harmony. But none of that mattered to the Xeroth Dominion. To the Dominion, the Valari were resources, workers to mine crystal, slaves to build engines of war, and subjects who were forbidden to dream of freedom. Arin's hands moved across the faded pages of his family's history book. The ink was nearly gone, but he could still read the words written by his grandfather who had lived through the first days of conquest. The Dominion fell upon us with fire. They burned our skies, shattered our fleets, and chained our leaders. We thought someone would come. We thought the galaxy would not stand silent, but no one came. The young historian closed the book with trembling fingers. He whispered softly, though no one was there to listen. Was hope only a lie? He wanted to believe there was more, that beyond the chains and shadows someone cared. But the galaxy had turned its back. The few species that had tried to fight the Dominion had been destroyed. Others had surrendered, believing it was better to kneel than to be burned. The Valari had learned this lesson the hard way. That evening, Arin walked through the hidden tunnels beneath the old library. These passages were once used by scholars to protect rare texts during times of storm or flood. Now they served another purpose. Deep inside, in a chamber lit only by glowstones, the last whispers of resistance gathered. Arin stepped quietly into the circle of figures. Old farmers, miners, healers, and a few former soldiers sat around the dim light. They were not an army. They had no weapons strong enough to pierce Dominion armor. Yet still they met, because sometimes whispering the truth was its own kind of rebellion. An elder spoke first. His voice was low but steady. The Dominion's grip grows tighter. They will increase quotas again. More of our children will be taken to their mines. A hush fell over the group. Everyone knew what that meant. The Dominion took young Valari to dig crystals in distant asteroids. Few ever returned. A woman with tired eyes raised her hand. I heard something, she said. A rumor. Beyond the outer rim, a fleet moves unseen. They say it is not Dominion. They say it is something different? Different? Another man whispered. Whose fleet is strong enough to move without being crushed? There is no one left. The woman shook her head. They call themselves humans. The word fell into the chamber like a spark in dry grass. Arin had heard it before. He remembered faint stories told by his mother when he was young. Tales of strange beings who came from a blue world, who fought like storms, who never bowed even when broken. But they were myths, fantasies told to children so they could sleep without fear. Humans do not exist, said one of the miners bitterly. If they did, they would have come already. They are just shadows of hope. But Arin did not speak. He only listened. Somewhere inside, a quiet voice stirred. What if the myths were not lies? What if far beyond the Dominion's chains there was a people who would not surrender? That night, Arin returned to his balcony. He looked up at the skies again, at the warships blotting out the stars. His people were weak, he knew it. They had no weapons, no armies, no saviors. But the whisper of that single word, humans, refused to leave his mind. He remembered the stories clearly now. His mother had told him, the humans are wild. They are reckless. They do not bend when they are struck. They stand again and again until even the strongest enemy fears them. Aaron whispered into the cold air, "If you exist, come. If you are real, let the stars show us a sign." But the night remained silent. The only answer was the dark shape of Dominion cruisers drifting across the heavens. Days passed, then weeks. Life in the city grew harsher. The Dominion raised their demands. Families wept as more young ones were taken. Aaron walked the streets and saw despair in every face. Some no longer lifted their eyes at all, as if the sky itself had betrayed them. He continued to write in his journals, recording everything. If we are to vanish, he thought, let someone in the future know we tried to keep the truth alive. But deep inside, even he began to surrender to silence. One evening, as he sat by the balcony again, he thought of a phrase his grandfather had written. When the light fades, only hope can guide us, but what if there was no hope left? He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, Aaron felt what it meant to truly give up. He no longer searched the skies for miracles. He no longer whispered for saviors. He let his heart grow still. The Valari had lived for thousands of years. They had sung songs, built wonders, dreamed of futures, but now, under the shadow of the Dominion, all of that seemed to end. And Aaron, the last historian, believed he was recording the final chapter of a dying world. What he did not know was that far beyond the rim of Dominion space, engines roared and ships unlike any the Valari had ever seen were moving closer. The whispers were not lies. The myths were not empty. The storm was coming. But for now, on Velar Prime, the people had given up hope. The days after Aaron Velthar gave up his last spark of hope were gray and heavy. Velar Prime lived in silence, its people moving like shadows through empty streets. Dominion soldiers filled the markets and squares, their dark armor reflecting the pale sun. Every step of their boots sounded like chains being dragged across the ground. The Dominion had ruled for so long that even children no longer asked about freedom. They grew up knowing nothing but fear, obedience, and the black sigil painted on every wall. For them, the word future meant only one thing: service to the Dominion. But whispers began to rise. Quiet at first, no louder than the rustle of leaves in an abandoned courtyard. They spread through markets, through mines, through the hidden tunnels beneath the city. Whispers of fire. It began with the resistance. The same group Aaron had visited in the old library tunnels gathered again, though most of them had lost faith long ago. Yet a farmer spoke with trembling excitement. "I heard a patrol was destroyed last week," he said. "Not by accident. Their warship vanished, burned in the skies near the outer rim." The others stared at him. "Who could have done such a thing?" "Not us," the farmer admitted. "Not any enslaved world. No one has ships fast enough. But the reports say it was something new. Something the Dominion fears." The word fear was strange to hear. No one thought the Dominion capable of such a feeling. Aaron sat quietly listening. He had heard similar rumors before. Stray signals on communication channels. Reports of strange energy readings near forgotten star systems. Tales of fleets that appeared and vanished before Dominion ships could react. "Maybe it's true," said the woman who had once spoken of humans. Her voice shook, but her eyes glowed faintly with hope. "Maybe it is them." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. "Humans," whispered one of the miners. "The ghosts of the rim. The fighters who never bow, they do not exist," muttered another. "They are only myths." But Aaron felt a strange stirring inside him. For days he had lived in darkness, his hope gone. But now, at the sound of that word, he felt something flicker again, like the smallest flame struggling to live in the wind. That night, he returned to his balcony. He looked up at the stars, but instead of despair, he tried to listen. To imagine ships moving among them, unseen by Dominion eyes. His mind returned to the old stories. Humans, his mother had said, were different. They did not fight like other species. They did not surrender when they lost battles. They grew stronger, fiercer each time they were struck down. His grandfather's book had mentioned them once too. Long ago, traders spoke of a small blue planet, home to beings who survived storms, ice, and fire, and carried that endurance into the stars. If the rumors were true, then perhaps humanity had finally arrived. The following weeks brought more whispers. A Dominion cruiser disappeared near the Helos cluster. No wreckage was found, only silence. A mining station reported unknown ships moving at impossible speed. Before the Dominion could investigate, the signals vanished. Even the patrols over Velar Prime seemed more nervous, their formations tighter, their movements quicker, as though they were expecting attack. Aaron noticed the change. Dominion soldiers who once marched with arrogance now glanced often at the skies. Their commanders shouted more harshly than before, as if anger could hide their unease. The Velari people began to notice as well. In the streets, some dared to whisper again, their voices carrying the word humans like a secret prayer. But not all believed. Many warned that hope was dangerous. The Dominion crushes hope harder than rebellion, one elder said. If we dream too much, they will punish us even more. Aaron understood the fear. Yet deep inside, he felt his thoughts change. He no longer saw humans as myths. He began to think of them as shadows moving just beyond the horizon, waiting for the right moment. One day, while searching through the archives of the library, Aaron discovered an old data crystal hidden inside a broken wall panel. Dust covered it, but when he placed it in the reader, a flickering image appeared. It was a recording from a century ago. A Velari explorer spoke in a clear voice. "We have met them," the explorer said. "The humans. They are unlike any we have known. They laugh in the face of storms. They argue among themselves, yet when danger comes, they unite like fire. Their ships are not the largest, nor their weapons the strongest, but their will is a storm itself." The recording ended abruptly. Aaron sat in silence, his heart racing. The voice was real. This was no myth, no rumor. His ancestors had truly met humans, and if they had once walked among the stars, then perhaps they still did. That night, Aaron returned to the Resistance meeting with the crystal in his hands. He played the message before the small circle of weary Velari. The flickering voice filled the chamber. Words about humans, about storms, about unbroken will. The listeners leaned forward, their eyes wide. For a moment, the air felt alive again. "They are real," Aaron said softly. "They were here. If they were once in the stars, then perhaps they are the ones moving now. Perhaps they are closer than we think." The group looked at one another. Some smiled for the first time in years. Others still shook their heads, unwilling to believe. But the flame had been lit. Even the most doubtful could not deny the hope in the room. But the Dominion also heard whispers. Within days, orders spread across the enslaved cities. Anyone caught speaking of humans would be punished. Any gathering of more than 3 was forbidden. Patrols doubled and the skies filled with warships. It was clear. The Dominion feared something. Aaron realized then that the rumors must be true. The Dominion was not afraid of shadows. They were afraid of enemies they could not control, and if the Dominion feared humans, then humans were real. As the weeks stretched on, the whispers grew stronger. Resistance groups in other cities reached out through secret channels, sharing signs of strange battles. They spoke of fleets tearing through the clouds like thunder, overwhelming Dominion patrols and vanishing again. For the first time in Aaron's life, the Velari were not speaking only of despair. They were speaking of possibility. Still, fear remained. The Dominion was powerful, and if humans truly fought them, then war was coming. Some Velari worried that their world would suffer even worse if caught between giants. But Aaron believed differently. He felt it in his bones, in the words of his grandfather's book, in the voice of the long-dead explorer. The humans were not conquerors. They were fighters, and fighters did not leave the weak behind. One evening, Aaron stood again on the balcony of the old library. The night sky stretched endlessly above him. For the first time in many months, he lifted his eyes not with despair, but with a strange calm. The stars shimmered faintly. The Dominion ships moved slowly across the horizon, heavy and dark. But Aaron whispered into the silence, his voice steady now. "If you are there, if the whispers are true, come. The Velari are waiting. The galaxy is waiting." And though the night gave no answer, far beyond Velar Prime, beyond the Dominion's grip, engines burned, ships prepared. The storm was coming closer. The night skies above Velar Prime had always been heavy with Dominion warships. Their black hulls reflected no light, like shadows carved from iron. They floated above the world as a warning, a reminder that rebellion was hopeless. But on this night, Aaron Velthar felt something different. He stood on the broken balcony of the old library, the same place where he had whispered to the stars many times before. The air was unusually still, and the faint glow of the moons painted the streets in silver. He could hear no patrols nearby, only silence. a silence too deep, too heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then the silence shattered. A sound like thunder rolled across the skies, not from the ground, but from above the clouds. The Valari had not heard thunder in decades. Their world storms had been silenced by Dominion weather machines. Yet now the heavens rumbled as if the planet itself had awakened. Arine's eyes widened. He stepped forward, gripping the balcony rail. The clouds above began to twist and glow, flashes of light pulsing within them. Dominion ships turned sharply, their engines flaring as they rose higher. The first explosion split the night. A Dominion patrol cruiser, proud and menacing, was suddenly torn apart by a streak of fire that descended from the clouds. Pieces of burning metal rained down like falling stars. Screams echoed in the streets below as the Valari rushed out of their homes, looking to the skies. For generations they had only seen Dominion ships. But tonight something new appeared. Through the burning clouds, enormous ships broke through. Their hulls were not sleek like Dominion craft, but powerful, heavy, alive with energy. They moved with a strange beauty, shapes built for war but also for survival. Engines thundered, weapons glowed, and symbols unknown to the Valari were painted across their sides. The humans had come. The Dominion reacted quickly. Dozens of warships formed into tight formations, their weapons glowing red as they prepared to fire. Orders crackled through their comms, their commanders shouting for all forces to rise. The Valari had seen such movements before. The Dominion always crushed intruders within moments, but tonight was different. The human fleet moved like a storm unleashed. Instead of standing still, they surged forward in sudden, unpredictable bursts. Their ships darted between Dominion formations, striking from angles no Valari had ever seen. Where Dominion ships fired in careful, slow precision, the humans answered with furious speed, barrages of missiles, beams of energy, and bursts of kinetic fire that tore through armor. Explosions lit the skies like 1,000 suns. Arn watched in awe, his heart racing. This was not the careful, measured warfare of the Dominion. This was chaos-controlled, a storm shaped into fury. The humans fought as if every strike carried not only skill but passion, rage, and unbreakable will. For the first time in his life, Arn saw Dominion ships retreat. The Valari in the streets began to cheer. At first the sound was uncertain, almost fearful, as though they dared not believe what they were seeing. But as more Dominion ships fell in flames, their voices rose. The silence of the city broke, replaced by shouts of joy and disbelief. "Who are they?" a child cried. "They are real," whispered an elder, tears in her eyes. "The humans are real." Aaron's hands trembled as he held the balcony rail. He had dreamed of this moment, imagined it, even prayed for it, yet nothing compared to seeing it with his own eyes. The myths were not myths. The whispers were not lies. Humanity had arrived like thunder from the heavens. But the battle was not over. Dominion reinforcements poured in from orbit, larger vessels descending like giants. One of their dreadnoughts, a ship the size of a mountain, aimed its cannons toward the human fleet. The skies shook as energy beams tore through the night. The humans did not retreat. Instead, smaller human ships broke formation and darted toward the dreadnought. They flew dangerously close, weaving between the beams with reckless precision. To the Valari it looked like madness, suicidal. But the humans moved as if they had practiced such maneuvers 1,000 times. A blinding flash erupted as they unleashed their strike. Missiles slammed into the dreadnought's engines. Explosions tore through its hull, and the giant vessel, once thought invincible, began to fall. It crashed into the sea beyond the horizon, the shockwave shaking the very ground of Velar Prime. The people screamed, not in fear but in triumph. Moments later, smaller human craft broke through the atmosphere, descending toward the city. They were not warships but landing vessels. Their hulls glowed as they slowed, and then they touched down in the great square before the Capitol Tower. The same square where Dominion banners had hung for generations. Arn could not stop himself. He ran from the library through the streets now filled with rushing Valari, until he reached the square. The Dominion soldiers who guarded the area raised their weapons, but before they could fire, human soldiers emerged. Their armor was heavy, their visors glowing faintly. They moved with confidence, every step strong and sure. The ground seemed to shake beneath their boots. Without hesitation, they opened fire. Their weapons roared with thunder, cutting through Dominion armor as if it were paper. Within minutes, the square that had once been a place of fear was cleared. The Dominion flag was torn down, trampled beneath human boots. And for the first time in 70 years, the Valari saw the sky above their capital without the Dominion's mark. Aaron stood frozen as the humans spread across the square. He had imagined them many times, but the reality was overwhelming. They were taller than most Valari, their movements sharp, their presence almost overwhelming. Yet when one of them turned toward the crowd, Aaron saw not cruelty but determination in their eyes. A human commander stepped forward, removing his helmet. His face was lined with scars, but his eyes were steady. He looked across the gathered Valari and spoke. His voice carried through translators. "You are not alone," he said. "The Dominion's time is ending. Humanity fights with you." The crowd erupted into cheers, tears, and cries of disbelief. Some fell to their knees, others shouted toward the heavens. For so long they had believed no one would come. Yet here they stood, saviors from the stars, not gods, but beings of flesh and fire who refused to bow. Aaron felt his chest tighten. His grandfather's words returned to him. When the light fades, only hope can guide us. And here, hope had come not as a whisper, but as thunder. That night, the Valari capital glowed not with fear, but with firelight of celebration. People filled the streets, singing songs they had not dared to sing in decades. Children laughed, elders wept, and families embraced. For once, the Dominion was not the master of their skies. Aaron sat by the edge of the square, watching as human soldiers worked beside Valari volunteers, clearing wreckage and tending to the wounded. These were not conquerors. They did not take, they gave. They offered protection, food, medicine. They fought not to rule but to free, and Aaron realized something deeper. Humanity had not come only for the Valari. Their war was larger, their fight against the Dominion a storm that reached across many worlds. The Valari were only one piece of a much greater struggle, but tonight that did not matter. Tonight Aaron knew a truth his people would never forget. The humans were real, and they had broken the silence of despair. The storm had begun. The first light of dawn stretched across Valor Prime like a gentle brush across a canvas, illuminating streets that had once been shadows of despair. For the first time in decades, the people could walk freely beneath the open sky, breathing air that no longer carried the weight of fear. Human ships still hovered in the atmosphere above, their engines quiet now, but their presence remained a comforting reminder. Aaron Velthar wandered through the square, his steps unsteady but his heart full. He had witnessed the impossible. The humans had come, fought and won battles no one believed could be won. And now, their soldiers moved among the Valari not as conquerors, but as allies, teaching them, guiding them, and giving them a glimpse of a life they had long believed impossible. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of hope. Children ran through the streets with small flags the humans had handed out, shouting their excitement and waving to the towering human soldiers. Markets that had been empty for decades were slowly filling again, as human engineers helped repair water systems, food supplies, and electricity. The Dominion had tried to erase culture, but the humans were restoring it, reminding the Valari that life, even after darkness, could bloom. Aaron approached a small group of Valari volunteers gathered near a damaged fountain. Humans were there too, showing them how to repair machinery and reinforce walls against potential Dominion attacks. Aaron's eyes rested on one human woman, tall and strong, her uniform scuffed from the battle the night before. She smiled at a young Valari boy as he carried a crate of supplies, guiding his movements patiently, as though teaching him something more than just mechanics. "They don't just fight," Aaron whispered to himself. "They teach. They protect. They care." The reality of it struck him. Humanity's strength was not only in their ships or weapons. It was in their spirit, their determination, and their refusal to leave anyone behind. Later, Aaron was invited to a temporary command center set up in the city's Grand Hall. Human officers and Valari leaders huddled around holographic maps, planning the next moves against the Dominion. It was unlike anything Aaron had ever seen. The humans coordinated with precision, yet they welcomed input from the Valari, valuing knowledge and experience from a species that had endured decades under tyranny. One human officer, a man with a calm but commanding presence, noticed Aaron observing quietly from the side. He nodded in greeting. "You've been through a lot," the officer said gently. "But your people are strong. You survived. And surviving is the first step toward victory." Aaron hesitated. I never thought we could survive," he admitted. "Not against them," the officer smiled faintly. "No one does. But that is why we fight. Not because we expect easy victories, but because every life is worth it. Every world matters. And when you fight for what is right, strength grows in ways you cannot predict." Aaron felt a warmth he had not known for decades. These humans, he realized, had a philosophy unlike any other species the Velari had encountered. They fought not for power, not for conquest, but for freedom, and in that purpose, their courage became contagious. Over the next few days, the Velari began to rebuild under the guidance of humans. They repaired bridges, restored energy grids, and cleared debris from streets still scarred by the Dominion's presence. Aaron observed the process with awe. Humans moved tirelessly, but they never seemed to grow weary. They worked side by side with Velari volunteers, sharing knowledge, teaching strategies, and instilling confidence that the Velari had long forgotten. Aaron met a human engineer named Mara. She had dark hair streaked with silver, and her hands were calloused from battle and labor alike. She showed him how to operate a small energy generator, explaining each step with patience. "Your people have been through darkness," Mara said, "but light is not just something you wait for. You build it piece by piece with your own hands." Her words struck Aaron deeply. For so long the Velari had waited for a savior. Now he realized that the humans were not just rescuers, they were teachers of hope. They showed that even in the face of overwhelming odds, effort and courage could rebuild what had been lost. News came from other planets enslaved by the Dominion. Humans had already begun liberating neighboring worlds, moving like a storm through the Dominion's territory. The Velari received reports of ships tearing through enemy fleets with unbelievable speed, protecting civilians and resisting retaliation with unmatched precision. Aaron read every message, feeling a mixture of awe and determination. The humans were not merely fighters. They were symbols, carriers of hope for all who had been crushed under Dominion rule. And now that hope had reached Velar Prime. In the evenings, the city square filled with Velari who gathered to watch the human ships hover silently in the sky. Soldiers walked among them, sharing stories of past battles, teaching children about strategy and explaining how they had learned to survive and thrive even when the galaxy seemed against them. Aaron noticed the children were no longer afraid. They laughed, they ran, and they began to dream again. The same eyes that had once stared at the sky in despair now searched for shapes in the stars, wondering what wonders might come next. One young girl ran to Aaron, holding a small, crudely drawn picture of a human ship. "Look," she said excitedly. "They are amazing. Can we go with them one day?" Aaron smiled, tears welling in his eyes. "Perhaps," he said softly. "They fight for all of us, and one day maybe we will stand with them." Yet, amidst the celebration, there were reminders of the danger that still existed. Dominion forces had not vanished entirely. Pockets of resistance remained, and the human fleet could not stay forever. Aaron understood that the fight was far from over. In a quiet moment, he approached the human commander from the battle the night before. The officer, Mara, and several others were coordinating the distribution of supplies to areas still recovering. "The Dominion will strike again," Aaron said cautiously. "Are you prepared for it?" The commander nodded. "We are not here to win quickly," he said. "We are here to change the balance. Every victory matters, but more importantly, every world we touch learns that freedom is possible. The Dominion may fight back, but they cannot destroy the idea of hope." Aaron absorbed the words. The human's presence was more than military might. It was inspiration. The Velari were learning that courage could be taught, that unity could grow stronger than fear, and that even the smallest act of resistance mattered. Days turned into weeks. Velar Prime began to flourish under human guidance. The Velari rebuilt schools, markets, and homes. The arts returned. Music, painting, and storytelling found their place once more. Humanity's example inspired the Velari not only to survive but to thrive. Aaron often walked the streets at night, gazing at the ships still hovering above. He thought of the countless worlds the humans had already touched, wondering how many lives had been changed simply by their arrival. One evening, Mara found him staring at the sky. "They are a storm," she said quietly. "But a storm that brings light, not destruction." Aaron nodded. Yes, they are different from anyone we have known. I think they are what we needed to remember who we are, she smiled. And now it's your turn. Your people have survived. You have learned from the storm. Soon you will carry hope yourself. The words echoed in Arin's mind. Humanity had given the Velari the courage to rebuild. But the real power, the real change was within the people themselves. They could no longer live only in fear. They had been given a spark, and it was their responsibility to keep it burning. As the first human ships prepared to leave Velar Prime to continue their campaign across the Dominion's territory, the Velari gathered in the city square. Arin stood among them, watching as the humans boarded their vessels, engines humming with quiet power. One of the officers stepped forward, raising a hand in farewell. "We do not conquer," she said. "We fight, and we fight for all who cannot fight for themselves. Remember that, Velari. The fight for freedom is never over, but it is always worth it." The humans lifted off one by one, leaving a sky still marked with the echo of their power. As they disappeared beyond the horizon, the Velari stood in awe, their hearts filled with gratitude and determination. Arin turned to the crowd. "They have given us more than protection," he said. "They have given us hope, and hope. Hope is stronger than any enemy." For the first time in generations, the people of Velar Prime understood that their world was not finished, that freedom was possible, and that the galaxy held allies willing to fight for what was right. The humans had arrived like thunder. They had torn through clouds of despair, leaving light in their wake, and though they had moved on to the next world in need, their message remained clear. Hope was not a gift, it was a force, and the Velari would carry it forward. The sky above Velar Prime was quiet now, yet it was different from any night the Velari had known. The Dominion's warships were gone, scattered and defeated, and the human fleet had departed to liberate other worlds. A soft glow from the moons reflected on streets now alive with movement, laughter, and rebuilding. Arin Velthar stood on the balcony of the old library, the same place where he had once whispered into the dark sky, begging for hope. He had seen miracles now, and his heart felt heavy with both awe and responsibility. The humans had come like a storm, and now they had gone. But they left something far greater than victory behind: inspiration. The city below was alive. Markets bustled, workshops hummed, and children played in streets once silent. The sounds of life, of hope restored, filled the air. For the first time in decades, Velar Prime felt alive again. Arin walked among the people, listening to stories of the humans' courage. One woman recounted how the humans had taken a small village from the Dominion's grasp with just a handful of soldiers. Another man described how humans had coordinated entire fleets to protect civilian transports, turning what should have been a desperate retreat into a triumph. "They are unstoppable," the man said in wonder, "but not because they are stronger than the Dominion. They are unstoppable because they never stop trying." Arin nodded silently. He knew it was true. Humans fought not for conquest or glory, but because they believed in what was right. And that belief, he realized, was more powerful than any weapon the Dominion could wield. The weeks that followed were filled with rebuilding and learning. The Velari were no longer merely survivors, they were becoming participants in a greater story. Humans had taught them how to restore communication networks, repair starships, and organize defenses. But beyond that, they had taught the Velari how to believe in themselves again. Arin found himself working alongside a human officer named Kieran. They were repairing a damaged energy relay on the edge of the city, a delicate task that required both skill and patience. Kieran moved with calm determination, guiding Arin through each step. "You have the knowledge," Kieran said. "We provide the guidance. But it is your hands, your minds that rebuild your world. Remember that your people are capable of more than you imagine." Arin felt the truth of those words deep in his heart. For too long the Velari had relied on myths and stories. Now they were realizing that courage was not just about waiting for someone to save them, it was about acting, together, with hope and determination. One evening, Arin returned to the balcony and gazed at the distant horizon. Far beyond Velar Prime, the stars were dotted with small glimmers of light, human ships moving from one enslaved world to another. He felt a strange sense of connection, knowing that humanity was carrying freedom across the galaxy. One battle, one world at a time. He thought of the young girl who had asked him if she could go with the humans. He realized that she, like many others, had now witnessed what hope could do. and now it was time for the Valari to take up that spark themselves. Arin turned and descended into the streets, stopping to speak with citizens as they rebuilt their homes. Everywhere he saw faces lit with determination, their steps stronger than before. The Valari were beginning to understand that freedom was not simply a gift. They would have to protect it, fight for it, and spread it to others. The humans had left small groups behind to assist with immediate rebuilding, but the bulk of the fleet had moved on. Messages from distant liberated worlds arrived daily, sharing tales of victories and struggles, of the Dominion retreating, and of countless species being freed from tyranny. The Valari realized that they were part of something far larger than themselves. One day, Arin gathered a small group of young Valari at the edge of the city. They were learning basic strategies for defense, understanding the value of coordination and communication. Arin spoke with a calm confidence that he had never felt before. "Do you remember how the humans fought?" he asked. "They were not the strongest by numbers, but they were strong because they never gave up. They protected the weak. They acted with courage, and they refused to let fear control them. That is the lesson we carry forward." The young Valari nodded eagerly. They listened, wide-eyed, understanding that the power of humanity was not only in their ships or weapons, but in their unwavering spirit. As the days passed, the Valari expanded their own defenses. Old starships long abandoned were repaired. The humans had taught them to coordinate fleets, to read signals, and to use tactics that allowed even smaller forces to fight effectively. GalacticPrime, once a world under shadow, became a beacon of resistance. Arin often walked among the engineers and soldiers, observing the growth of confidence among his people. They laughed again, debated strategies, and argued over ideas, not out of fear but out of hope. Humanity had shown them that even the smallest actions could make a difference. But the humans were more than teachers. They were symbols. Word spread across the galaxy that a fleet had moved through the Dominion's forces, liberating worlds thought lost. The Valari received messages from nearby systems asking for guidance, inspired by the tales of human courage. Arin realized that humanity had ignited something far greater than any battle. They had sparked a movement. Every world that had been touched by humans was beginning to fight back in its own way, creating a ripple that the Dominion could no longer control. He remembered the first night he had watched the storm break over GalacticPrime. The thunder had shaken the skies, tearing apart the despair that had held his people for generations. Now he understood that the storm was not over. It had only begun. One evening, as the twin moons rose together, Arin stood on the balcony and looked out at the stars. The city below hummed with life, yet his eyes traced the distant lights of human ships moving from one world to the next. He whispered to the sky, his voice steady and full of resolve. "You have shown us the impossible. You have taught us courage, hope, and determination. We will carry it forward. We will not forget." The stars remained silent, yet Arin felt a quiet strength, a connection to the distant fleet that had torn through the clouds and saved his world. The humans had left a mark, not just on GalacticPrime, but on the hearts of all who had seen them. In the months that followed, GalacticPrime transformed. The Valari were no longer merely survivors, they were defenders, builders, and leaders. They organized fleets of their own, patrolling the skies to prevent the Dominion from returning. They rebuilt cities and schools, teaching children the lessons of hope and courage that the humans had exemplified. Arin oversaw many of these efforts, documenting every lesson, every strategy, every story of courage. He understood now that the story of his people was no longer one of despair, but of renewal. Humanity had shown them the path, but it was up to the Valari to continue walking it. The humans never stayed long. They moved from world to world, liberating planets, inspiring species, and leaving hope in their wake. Yet the memory of their arrival burned brightly in GalacticPrime. They had been like thunder tearing through the clouds, unexpected, powerful, and impossible to ignore. And so, the Valari lived differently. They remembered the despair of the past, but they never forgot the lesson of the humans. They learned to fight when necessary, to protect one another, and to believe that even in the darkest times, courage and hope could prevail. Arin often spoke to the young Valari, repeating the words of the humans, "Freedom is not given, it is earned." Courage is not measured by strength alone, but by the willingness to act for what is right. The children listened, wide-eyed, knowing that the story of the humans was real. It was no myth. It was proof that one species, guided by courage and determination, could change the galaxy. Years later, when Aaron looked back on the events of that fateful night, he understood the truth clearly. Humanity had come like a storm, tearing through despair and leaving light in its wake. But the storm did not end with them. It continued in every heart they had touched. The Valari had learned to fight, to protect, and to inspire. They would carry the message of hope to other worlds just as the humans had. And though the fleet had moved on, the thunder they brought would never leave Valar Prime. Aaron closed his eyes and smiled. The galaxy was vast, the Dominion was still out there, and challenges remained. But for the first time in centuries, the Valari knew they were not alone. They had hope. And hope, Aaron realized, was stronger than any darkness. The storm had come. The storm had left its mark. And the thunder, the human thunder, would never end.